Chapter 11. The St. Helena of old had been as a paradise, avers Euphemia. The orange and lemon groves, the coffee fields, gone before your time, Euphy. Does that mean I am forbidden to mourn them? They are mine as much as anyone's to mourn. I'd be the last to lay any sort of claim, says the Reverend. Whilst the astronomers were sailing there from the Cape, I was journeying on, quite the other way, to India, and then past India. St. Helena was a part of the tale that I missed, and along with it the Reverend Dr. Maskelyne, who has continued, even unto our day, as Astronomer Royal, publishing his almanac and doing his bit for global trade. Something wrong with that, Wicks? Inquires Mr. Lespark. Only insofar as it is global and not celestial, replies the Reverend with a holy smirk, mastered in his first week of curacy. The merchant of purposeful explosion throws an arm across his brow. Your halo blinds me, sir. Aye, most Italian. Joy of it, I'm sure. More of this brandy ought to dim it some, genial Uncle Lomax, grinning mischievously at his older brother, pours the Reverend another beakerful. From outside, frozen rain sweeps briefly yet pointedly at the glossy black window panes. Then how are we ever to know what happened among the three of 'em upon that little-known island? Uncle Ives, a bit smug, everyone thinks. Well, let us see. Maskelyne was there the better part of a year, aware from early on that he could not obtain the observations he wanted, owing to a defective plumb line suspension on his sector. Yet there, enisled, remaining, 29 years old, first time he's been away from home, and he's facing months in what proves to be, those whose bedtime is nigh, stop your ears, an infamous port of call, quite alone in the mid-Atlantic, a town left to shift as it may, dedicated to naught but the pleasures of sailors, which is to say, every species of misbehaviour, speakable and not. Tides and lunars cannot have provided the Reverend Maskelyne full occupation. One is understandably curious as to what else may have befallen him. Something must have, the Reverend Cherrycoke agrees, else he should have emerged mad as all sooner or later go upon that island. An attack of reason, suggests Mr. Lespark. What's the mystery? Athelma shrugs. Didn't days take 24 hours to pass, as they do now? Bray peers through the candlelight. Why, Cars, how interesting. The idea in making port at St. Helena is to keep to windward, get southeast of the island and let the trade winds carry you to the coast, which you then follow, generally northward, till you come round to the lee side and on the other harbour of James's Town. and into the harbour of James's Town, where despite appearances of shelter, the oceanic waves continue to beat without ceasing, the clamour wind-borne, up across the lines and the parade, all being reduced to geometry and optical illusion, even what is waiting there all around, what is never to be named directly. Once ashore, the astronomers hear the ocean everywhere. No wall thick, nor mind composed, nor valley remote enough to lose it. It shakes the ground and traverses the boot soles of the watch, high in the ravines. The floorboards of taverns register its rhythmic blows, as they have the years of thumps from the swinging boots of seamen, whose destinies were sometimes to include homicide. As if keeping faith with that same brutal pulse, waiting upon a moment, needing but the single sighting, sworn to, vanished, the terrible authorization. Though the sun nightly does set below the island's stark horizon, what Mason sees from his first nightfall there is darkness rising up out of the sea, where all the carelessly bright day it has lain, as in a state of slumber, whilst at dawn that same darkness, almost palpably aware of his regard, appears to withdraw, consciously, to a certain depth below the Atlantic surface. In the astrology of this island, the sun must be reckoned of less importance than darkness, incorporated as some integral, antiluminary object, with its own motions, positions and aspects, black sheep of the family of planets, neither to be sacrificed to Hades, nor spoken of by name. Sirius, which masculine remains here to observe, is the island's zenith star, as is Gamma Draconis for Greenwich. Englishmen are born under the dragon, St. Helenians under the dog. At Ben Coolin, Mason and Dixon would have been under inconstant Mira in the whale. These signs are the apocrypha of astrology. Every midnight the baleful thing is there, crossing directly overhead, the yellow dog. There inverted among the wires, all but flowing, treacly, as you'd say. Would even a Portsmouth pole wear such a vivid, unhealthy shade of yellow? A very small town clings to the edge of an interior that must be reckoned part of the other world. No change here is gradual. Events arrive suddenly. All distances are vast. The wind, brutal and pure, is there for its own reasons, and human life, any life, counts for close to naught. The town has begun to climb into the ravine behind it, and thus averaged overall to tilt toward the sea. After rainstorms, the water rushes downhill in eagers and riffles and cataracts through the town, rooftop to rooftop, in and out of windows, leaving behind a shivering dog from uphill, taking away the coffee pot, till leaving it in its turn somewhere else for a footstool, thus bartering its way out to sea. The horizon has little use for lengthy sunsets. Creatures of the ocean depths approach the shoreline, as near as the little coves where the water abruptly becomes lavender and aquamarine, remaining to observe, deliberate in their movements, without fear. For years, travellers have reported that the further up into the country one climbs, the more the sea appears to lie above the island, as if suspended and kept from falling fatally upon it through the operations of mysterious and impenetrable on the part of the guardian. As if in payments credited against the deluge, upon no sure basis of prediction, the great sea rollers will rise and come against the island, reaching higher than the town with the Jacobite name, though perhaps not quite to the ridgeline above it. For anyone deluded enough to remain down at sea level, there must come a moment when he finds himself looking upward at the crests approaching. The public trees quite small in outline below them, the cannon, the bastions of no avail. Did he choose more prudently to escape to the heights, he might from above, squinting into spray whose odour and taste are the life of the seas, behold a company of giant robed beings, risen incalculably far away over the horizon, bound this way upon matters forever unexplained, moving blind and remorseless across the sea, as if the island did not exist. Not as spectacular, older residents declare, as the rollers of 50, then it seemed 'twas the triumph of a sea gone mad, and the island must be lost. Being part of a general exodus to high ground, one may not pause for too long to gaze and reflect upon the vastness of empty waterplain, the sun glare through the salt mists after the sleepless climb through the dark, the only choices within one's control, those between persistence and surrender. Within their first week upon the island, all visitors have this dream. Out upon Munden's Point stand a pair of gallows, simplified to pen strokes in the glare of this ocean sky. A visitor may lounge in the evening upon the platform behind the lines, and as a visitor to London might gaze at St. Paul's, regard these more sinister forms in the failing northern light, perhaps being led to meditate upon punishment or upon commerce. For commerce without slavery is unthinkable, whilst slavery must ever include, as an essential term, the gallows. Slavery without the gallows being as hollow and waste a proceeding as a crusade without the cross. Down at the end of the great ravine that runs up country from the sea, beneath the cliffs, along the batteries in the evenings, islanders looking to catch the breeze will nightly promenade. If one ignores the guns darkly shining and the armed sentries, the island might be fancied an East Indiaman of uncertain size, and these crepuscular parades to and fro, a passenger's turn upon her weather decks, though at closer inspection each fizz might suggest less a traveller's curiosity than some long-standing acquaintance with the glum, even among the women who appear each sunset. Besides those resident here for purposes of nautical amusement, the birds of passage through St. Helena make up a mixed flock. Convicts being transported to the South Seas for unladylike crimes in England, with St. Helena one of the steps in their purgatory, young wives on their way out to India to join husbands in the navy, a tremble with tales, haunting the day like a shadow from just beneath the horizon ahead of the black hole of Calcutta, and company perpetuals heading home, such shuttles upon the looms of trade as Mrs. Rollright, late of Portland, who keeps opium in her patch box and commutes frequently enough upon the India run to have had 4 duels fought over her already, though she has yet to see her 20s out. Almost to a woman they confess to strange and inexpressible feelings when the ship makes landfall. The desolate line of peaks, the oceanic sunlight, coming about to fetch the road, losing the trade wind at Sugarloaf Point, hugging the shore and playing the eddies, the identical route. 'Twas, oh God, here we are again, whilst to first-timers another planet, somehow accessible from this. There's one a sop with the Jew, Dixon remarks, in the claret-coloured velvet there with the Chinese shawl and the kid boots. She seems to recollect thee for fair. Tyburn Charlie! Well, prick me with a busk-pin and tell me 'twas all a dream. 'Tis I, little Florinda. Yes, you do remember, but last year. And she sings in a pleasant alto. 'Twas the 5th day of May in the year of our Lord, 1760, that the brave Lord Ferris ascended the steps of the scaffold as bold as a hero. Mason amiably joining in, they continue. I am ready, quoth he, if you'll quote me your fee. To the cruel hangman's eye sprang a terror. Of your silver-trimmed coat, I'll admit I made note, but must no longer claim it, oh dear no. Oh my, oh dear, oh, you must think I've the morals of Nero. Be it dangle 'em high or strangle 'em low, hangmen have feelings, or didn't ye know? The year after Rebecca's death was treacherous ground for Mason, who was as apt to cross impulsively by ferry to the bosom of Wapping and another night of joyless low debauchery, as to attend routs in Chelsea, where nothing was available betwixt eye flirtation and the pox. In lower situated imitations of the Hellfire Club, he hurtled carelessly along some of lust's less frequented footpaths. Ever further he did not scape a noting from pleasure. The moonlight falling upon the lawns, the trees, the walks, claiming the colour of desire, as to represent all that passion, seething within that small corner of town, the music through the leaves, each washed in moon-white, to the fabulators of Grub Street, a licentious night world of rakes and whores, surviving only in memories of pleasure. Small, darting, winged beings, untrustworthy as remembrances, yet its infected, fragrant, soiled encounters neath the moon were as worth as any an evil uninnocence. Uncle, how be it? Another cup, sir? 'Twas then that Mason began his practice, each Friday, of going out to the hangings at Tyburn, expressly to chat up women, upon a number of assumptions, many of which would not widely be regarded as sane. Rolling out the Edgware Road to where they climb the ladder to go to sleep. The crowd is all a tiptoe and the skies are bright. 'Tis a lovely day to come and have a peep. He'll drop right through the floor, tick-tock. He'll dance upon the air, knock-knock. Whilst 'neath the deadly never-green 'tis merry as a fair, and if you're lucky to be short enough, with no place much to stare, why you might even you might even not even know you're there. Turned 32 but days before, Mason, as a gift of festivity to himself, attends the much-heralded hanging of Lord Ferrers for the murder of Johnson, his steward. What seems the entire world of fashion has assembled, with each trying to outdress every other, nonce never before seen, many never to be seen again, wigs as elaborately detailed as gowns, coats especially commissioned for the occasion, with a classic depicted in gold brocade. With a classic 13-turn noose motif to the braiding and the smoking pistol depicted in gold brocade. As Mason, feeling shabby, curses himself for not having worn a more stylish outfit, he notes a young woman observing him. When he meets her gaze, she immediately switches it away with a look of annoyance. Not with Mason, it pleases him to fancy, so much as with herself, for happening to be the one caught staring. There being scores of good reasons why no further degree of fascination will develop from this. Judging by her escort, she's some rising beauty of the town, whose looks more than excuse an absolute lack of taste in any matter of costume, whilst at the same time she finds herself mysteriously drawn to snuff-coloured and frankly murkier statements, such as Mason's here. "Hello, do you think you'll get much of a hard-on then?" is her greeting. They say that agents of Lady F are about, betting heavily against it. Mason gapes in despair. He'll be days late in thinking up any reply to speech as sophisticated as this. "In my experience," he might say, "'tis usually the innocent who get them, and the guilty who fail to." How very curious! She will not blink, though her nostrils may flare. Her escorts will titter, and her little dog Biscuit, alone scenting her onset of interest, will begin to act up. Could remorse ever really unman any of you? Why no, 'tis rather that surprise invigorates us. Flirtatiously she scowls, as Mason goes rattling on morosely. Take the noted highwayman Phep but last week, most likely not insane, being moved by the mathematics of his wealth, or rather lack of it. More than by any criminal passion, the membrum virile was remarkably flaccid, at least according to the jobbers who cut him down. And subsequently up, chirps the maiden. For consider that the murderer cannot, in the moment, know the ecstatic surprise of the innocent, having borne within him from life's beginning an acquaintance with the sudden drop and snap of its end. He dreams about it, sometimes when awake. He commits his fatal crime out of a need to reconverge upon that blinding moment where all his life was ever focused. Her eyes have grown enormous and moist. The bodice of her gown squeaks gently at its seams. Her modesty piece flutters as if itself perplexed. The fops accompanying her have been freed to resume their chief interest, the exchange of gossip. Even custodial eyes are elsewhere. "Sir," she murmurs, "I have ever sought a man such as yourself." There is a sudden roar from the crowd, half for and half against, as his lordship's carriage arrives, and the fourth Earl steps out. Seamen throw unchewable sausages and half-eaten scones. Brightly dressed women throw roses. "Hideous suit," remarks one of the fops. "What's that shade? Some kind of fawn?" Altogether too light for the occasion. "I do like the silver bits, though," comments his friend, Seymour. All manner of retainers in black livery bustle about, the one attracting the most notice being the rope-bearer, for 'tis rumoured that Lord Ferrers is to be hanged at his request with a rope of silk. The bearer is a slight figure in black velvet, whose skin in the high sunlight appears paper white. all the way from the tower, atop the bright jinglings of the carriage, expensively encrusted and plated by highly paid Italians, like a miniature propelled in its strange, slow progress by some invisible child, as the fatal rope, held aloft, perfectly white upon a black silk cushion, for the inspection of all the straining eyes. "Well, it's still imp for me," someone remarks, "all things being equal, if not all men." "Aye, silk's what they fancy out in India with their thuggee. Over the wall in your window. Job's done. Another tasty bite for old Kali. That's their goddess, as you'd say. Silk, it's scarcely there, and yet, precisely my point. Orange girls and beggars, ale pots gaming in the dirt, purses wafted away, glances intercepted, dogs bravely a prowl for scraps, as hungry blademen for dogs, buskers wandering and standing still with a wind from the gallows bringing every sigh, groan and ejaculation over the heads of the crowd to settle upon the hearing like ash upon the hats of spectators at a fire. The day wraps and fondles them as Mason and the temporarily heedless Beauty move together through the crowd, till they reach a barrow with awnings rigged against the sun. "Wine!" cries she. "Oh, let's do!" "This Chateau Gorse looks interesting," says Mason, "although as the day is mild, perhaps a chilled hock would be more apropos." "If not de rigueur," she replies. "But of course, chérie." They laugh at the piquance of these mots, and sip wine as the imbecile peer goes along toward his doom, till some kind of problem arises with the new trapdoor arrangement, today's being its first use at any public proceeding. "These frightful machines," she pretends to lament. "Shall our deaths, as well as our lives, be ruled by the philosophers and their army of mechanics?" "That trap's over-constructed," Mason has already blurted, "hence too heavy and bearing sidewise upon the lever and catch." He notes a sudden drop in the local temperature. "You are a man of science, then?" looking about, though not yet with panic. "I am an astronomer," Mason replies. "Ah, existing upon some sort of stipend, I imagine. Wonderful. I'd taken you for one of the better sort of kiddie. The way you were turned out, quite self-possession. I mean, one usually is able to tell. Alas, 'tis just as Mr. Bub Doddington warned me. 'Florinda,' said he, 'you are too young to appreciate men in either their wide diversity or for the pitiable simplicity of what they really want.' Can you guess what that is, my wren?" His wren. Well, it might have been one thing, mightn't it? And then again... "Excuse me, did I hear you, I'm sure inadvertently, mention that you receive assessments of character from Bub Doddington, the ancient Fitch of legend, that relic from a signally squalid era in our nation's political history, that Bub Doddington?" "Georgie is a particular friend," she flares in a way that suggests experience upon the stage. "If he may advise the Princess of Wales as to matters constitutional, he may advise me, whatever he wishes. He grows older, and a life of superhuman excess is at last presenting its bills, whose demands turn ever harsher with the days, even at the interest, yet a bargain. Will you have much to say, stargazer, when it is your time?" Mason lets his head drop abjectly. There's one, says Pierce, as he fell in the well. The truth is, madam, that I have envied your friend the honesty of his life, though being an earl helped, of course. If you mean that you envy his openness as to desires, I collect there are things you yourself may wish to do, that you haven't quite got the words for. And gazing at him steadily too. I? Mason's soul's beginning to ache, his brain unable to muster a thought. What he does not consequently understand is that, having reckoned him harmless, she has decided to get in a bit of exercise, in that endless refining which the crafts of coquetry demand, using Mason as a sort of practice dummy. You did have me going, Florinda. Well, I hope so, I'm sure. Tell me then, are you still gazing at the stars for simpleton silver? You remember that? Why, you're not saying, Charlie, that there are too many men in my life for me to remember? Surely 'tis not the aggregate total of all men, but how many kinds of men that matters. And that figure is manageable, thank ye. James's town, snug in its ravine, the watchfires high above keeping the nights from invasion, settles into the darkness. Smells of Eastern cooking pour out of the kitchen vents of the boarding houses and mix with that of the ocean. The town is for a moment an unlit riot of spices, pastry, fish and shellfish, penguin staffatas and seabird fricassees. Upon the swiftly darkening sea prospect in outline now appears a figure that lacks but a scythe in its grasp to turn all thoughts upon the brevity of life. "Daddums!" she cries. "Over here! Charlie, me fiancé, Mr. Mourneville." I meet so many of Florrie's old troop, the tall, cadaverous personages, whose eyes cannot be clearly seen hisses in the twilight. "Charlie, Charlie, you must have been one of the zanies." "Your theatrical sense, uncanny, sir," murmurs Mason. "Allow me to present my coadjutor, whose repertoire of jest is second only to what resides in the Vatican Library, Mr. Dixon. A Chinaman, a Jesuit, and a Corsican are riding up to Bath." End of chapter.